And I know you have no idea how beautiful your island Earth is until you see the whole thing from space, the whole island. And it's the only one we got. It's the Earth shot. Scrapes Lacey off the wall, floats him to the window, sees the Hawaiian Islands in the light of the dawn, and Lacey goes, that's it. That is the answer. It's home. What's more dangerous, the pirate or being tied to the dock? We said it's being tied to the dock.
Right now, our current law says that we should get to 40% renewable energy by 2030. With new numbers, it shows that we can get to up to 84% renewable energy, and that it's actually less expensive than just the current path. So how fast do you think that we can and should go?
We did a comprehensive assessment of the resource, island by island, rooftop by rooftop, wind resource by wind resource. And what we found is, under any plausible future, it is cheaper for Hawaii to go quicker in a clean energy transition. And so the speed at which this transition happens matters in terms of the severity of the impacts that we're going to face around the world in the decades ahead.
So important here in Hawaii because we use as much petroleum in ground transportation as we do in the entire electric grid. But in this new era of mobility, we can create new ways of thinking.
All of the criticisms that you're hearing now, which is this is voluntary, this is not enough, and by the way, someone else says this is too radical, you're going to turn our economy upside down, tourism will collapse, people won't be able to afford it.
We have to remember, we need to bring along many communities.
As we delay together, it delays all of us together, and moving forward together and moving forward faster is the surest way to ensure inclusivity of all.
Because it's not about creating an ecological utopia and then nobody can afford to live here. It's about building the kind of community that we want, which includes clean energy.
No matter how small the contributions we make, we are still changing the world.
So it's not about innovation being about cool tech, it's about people, and people thinking differently and thinking about solving problems together.
We know what the right thing to do is. We just now have to figure out how fast we can do it together.
Try to tap into that deep intrinsic motivation. Why am I here? What are we doing? And we often talk about nature, and we often talk about true nature. What is the true nature that's driving you? Why are we here? I think if you don't have that, you are untethered.
We're supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be taking the risk. We're supposed to be trying new ideas. And we're supposed to be failing, but we get up off the floor and keep going. That should be our identity. The notion is that what we knew in the end, kindness matters. Love and aloha, same thing. And, I'm proud to be here with, in my land, in my dirt, and the people that are taking care of it.
All right, aloha. So thanks, Joel, for the introduction. I can't take credit for VERGE being here in Hawaii, but we're so happy to have this team here and bringing us all together. I'm curious, do any of you remember that scene from the Terminator where T-1000 actually rises up out of the liquid from a computer program and evolves? Anyone remember this scene? So I had the privilege recently of actually visiting a technology company that does this. So they've reinvented 3D printing, which is actually kind of 2D printing over and over and over again in layers, and have reinvented 3D printing so you can actually pull objects out of any material up out of liquid. And it's about 100 to 1,000 times faster than 3D printing. So I'm telling you this because we're thinking a lot about what does the next 10 years look like. And at Elemental Accelerators are working with startups and entrepreneurs. We actually have the privilege of meeting people like this every day who are rethinking what's possible. So if you can 3D print 100 or 1,000 times faster, then you could actually do away with all the sort of logistics and putting things in containers and putting things in warehouses and moving them around and just say, oh, I need this today. And you could print that on location right when you need it, right? Sort of local for local manufacturing, which kind of blows your mind about what's possible in the world. And this past weekend, we had the CEO of that company, Carbon, with our Elemental Accelerator CEOs at our CEO Summit, really thinking through what is the future going to look like? And what is it going to look like in 10 years or maybe even sooner? And we like the idea of 10 years as something to think about because 10 years ago is when we started the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. And I love the video that Jeff showed us about actually what we were thinking about then, the goals we were setting, and how we were really on the right track in terms of getting there. So McKinsey did an analysis just a couple of weeks ago about what we thought was going to happen in 10 years and what actually happened. So now we know still that we are still sending $1 billion out of the state in exchange for oil. But we also can take a look at what happened compared to what we thought. And what we can see here in this chart, and the blue is kind of what we thought was going to happen in a mid-range, and the yellow is what might happen in a stretch goal, and then the white boxes are what actually happened. So what you can see here is that solar and wind actually went really fast, faster than we thought they were ever going to 10 years ago. And that geothermal and electric vehicles actually went a little bit slower than the projections from a few years ago. And then, whoa, like surprise, here's batteries. So this wasn't even kind of on the radar in terms of what we thought was going to happen. And these numbers represent the annual growth rate of these technologies. So this is something brand new that came on the scene. So in 10 years, some things will happen faster, some things will happen slower, and then some things will just kind of hit us out of nowhere and we'll get surprised. So at Elemental Accelerator, we're always thinking about how do we fund innovation, how do we select innovation for the next 10 years? And so what we did this year, and you saw like a little bit of that at the Earth Day Energy Summit, is last fall we commissioned an independent report, called it Transcending Oil. It's a play on words, ending oil. And we commissioned a report to say, given what's happened in technology in the last 10 years, and we've had a vast amount of change, what might be possible in the next 10, knowing what we know now? And so this was a quantitative analysis. We commissioned a group called the Rhodium Group to work with Smart Growth America to look at both electricity and transportation in 10 years. And many of you contributed to this. In fact, most of you in this room, and 200 hours of interviews and a lot of quant crunching as well. And they found something that surprised us a little bit, which was, and we just asked them, what is the least cost way to get to this renewable energy future? And they came back with this green wedge. So what you can see is that the blue line is what is in our current law from now till 2045. And the green lines are the least cost range to getting to renewable energy. And you can see that you actually look like under a range of possible future scenarios for the price of oil, renewables are cheaper than oil, and that pulling that future forward is actually cheaper. So that was kind of the finding from the quantitative analysis and all the work done with you folks as well. And so what we learned from this is does that matter? So we kind of zoomed in on this year 2030 because it looks like that's kind of where a lot of the action is. And if we wait till 2035 or 2045, it's a lot later. So if you zoom in on 2030 and look at that, does it matter to pull it forward? And what the analysis found is that means you actually create 3,500 more jobs by pulling it forward. And for context, there's about 2,700 auto mechanics in the state of Hawaii. So that gives you a sense of that scale. And actually, this is more jobs than the spring graduating class at UH Manoa. So it's significant. And then in terms of the jobs, these jobs pay $3 to $7 more per hour than the median wage of about $20 per hour in Hawaii. So pretty good jobs. And then the other thing we learned is that by pulling this forward, you actually save, in the macro sense, a significant amount of money. And it's because you're sending less money out of the state for oil, and so you save about $7 billion in cost savings by bringing this forward. But this isn't necessarily going to happen naturally. We actually have to work really hard together to make this happen. There's no silver bullet, or maybe there is one silver bullet, which I would say is collaboration and really working together, and Suzanne talked about that, really how we've gotten better at that as a state, and we have still really need to put our shoulder into it. But here's some of the companies from the Elemental Accelerator perspective. Here's just 8 examples of companies that we're working with to find innovation that's happening all over the world and right here at home that can help speed that transition and make it possible. So funding companies across the grid and sort of all over energy efficiency and in buildings and mobility to make this happen. These are just a few of them. But one thing we've learned also is that innovators are not just stuck in our companies or entrepreneurs. And many of you are working with these companies to try new things. And there are innovators across nonprofits, across government, across small business, and students in education all across our state. And it's these innovators, I think Nainoa was talking about, of sort of saying, is it safer to stay at the dock or to sail? And he said, it's more risky to stay at the dock. And these innovators every day are actually making that choice and saying that I'm going to take the risk and do something different, and I know that it's important, and that the mission matters more than operating the way I always have or staying safe where I am. I had the privilege recently of talking to a lot of students about kind of where they see the future for Hawaii and what they think this will look like. And it made me realize that so much of the wisdom that we have is actually there with our youth already. It's not something that we have to describe to them or tell them the future that makes sense sort of from a quantitative and numbers perspective, but something that actually already envisioned for our state. And I'm really happy to share that as we did this transcending oil work, there were 2 things that really stood out to us and the team at Elemental Accelerator from the work. The first is this question of pace and speed, and that bringing things forward matters. The second is that as we go at pace and at speed, we have to be even more intentional about making sure that everyone comes along. And that is a huge risk, but it's part of our values here in Hawaii. And we have to be intentional and thoughtful about it. So as a result of some of that work, we're doing a couple of things. I'm happy to share that we're going to be supporting a position specifically for social equity at the city with the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience that really is thinking about as we accelerate our way to a clean energy future and accelerate our way to a resilient economy, are we ensuring that we have social equity, that everyone gets to come from Waimanalo to Waianae, and everyone also from sort of Kauai to Ka'u, from Big Island, all the way across the state. So we're also supporting a position around inter-island collaboration, making sure everyone can come along. And the second thing is that we're really excited to be partnering with Blue Planet Foundation, because another thing that we learned from some of this work, but those of us who work in this space know, is that this is not something that can be done by just one entity. It's not the job of the utility. It's not the job of government. It's actually all of us working together. And Blue Planet Foundation is launching a really exciting initiative to highlight some of the work that's going on around the community, not just from those of us in this room that think about this every day and are deeply passionate about this, but people who are farmers or have restaurants or small business or students who are really working hard to make this clean energy future possible. So we're excited about that. I think I'll just close by saying that it can be hard to imagine the future. It's hard, I think, to imagine a world in which you can just sort of grow objects out of liquid and have anything you need on demand. And it can be hard to even imagine a world where everyone has what they need, when from the sort of the smallest folks or the largest in our cities have a city that works for them, that's inclusive for everyone. So before we bring up our next conversation and dive into this further, I'll show you one of our inspirations of a city that's accessible to everyone and something that kind of lights up our imagination. So here's what that looks like from Zootopia.